All right, I think we can begin. So I'm going to give over to Madeleine Hendricks, my colleague, just to introduce our speakers for this session.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I'm a faculty librarian for the Arts and Social Sciences, and we are really privileged to work with all the other support services on our campus so very well. Therefore, I would like to introduce Alison Buchholz and welcome her. She is the head of the Postgraduate Skills Development Program, housed within the Postgraduate Office Division for Research Development at Stellenbosch. With a research background in educational support and rich experience in the field of education, Alison is passionate about creating research-related opportunities for postgraduates, enabling them to succeed in their research ventures. As co-presenter, I would like to introduce Cristan Macleod, who is the Postgraduate Skills Development Officer. Her role is to provide support to the PG Skills Program, as well as marketing support for the Postgraduate Office. I would just like to say and mention that there will be answers at the end of the session. Kirchner will handle that. And there will be a recording sent to all people, all participants. And it will also be loaded on our YouTube space. So with that, I wish and welcome Alison all the best and welcome. And thank you in advance for both of you. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Marlene. Hello, everybody. Kirchner, if you can just indicate if you can hear me all right?
Yes, I hear you fine, Alison.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be jogging through a few slides with you this morning. I'll share my screen with you in a moment. And I understand that we have quite a varied audience, and that ranges from supervisors, lecturers, academic support staff, postgraduate students, amongst others. So we hope that we'll be able to provide something for each of you to take home with you, some tips or food for thought by the end of the session. So my part will be roughly half an hour, and then my colleague Cristan Macleod will take over and look more closely at actually using Turnitin. All right, let's see if I can share my screen. There you go. Okay, so the topic that I was asked to present on is specifically focused on utilizing Turnitin, using it effectively as a writing aid. And we always frame it within academic writing integrity whenever we do presentations to do with avoiding plagiarism and using Turnitin. So as Marlene indicated, I'm from the Postgraduate Office and I head the Postgraduate Skills Development Program. My colleague Cristan is my partner in crime. She is a wonderful support for us, not only as far as workshops, logistics, coordination goes, but she also a wonderful tech savvy and super graphic designer as well. Leah is our student intern, and she's often sort of working in the background, working hard in the background, and we formed a small postgraduate skills development program team within the postgraduate office. So if I look at my session outline, I'm going to talk about why Turnitin. Why do we use Turnitin at Stellenbosch University? What is Turnitin? How does it work? What's its purpose? And importantly, one needs to look at what are good qualities of academic writing. Some of you may have attended Selena Dalport's previous session looking at academic writing. And hopefully if you did, then you can take something from there and draw it into what I'm talking about today. And then Cristan will be looking at how to use Turnitin effectively, the actual demonstration, and I'll talk about a little bit of tips or things to be aware of when working with Turnitin. Good. So, we use Turnitin, perhaps I should dwell on that one, mainly because the university has license for the Turnitin program or tool software, and it is one of the biggest, has the biggest database of these types of tools, and therefore we are encouraged to use it. We have free access to it, and you'll see it also is talked about in the policy of plagiarism in support of academic integrity. So let's have a look at that policy, and then I'm trying to frame how the policy and the indication that we should be using Turnitin is valid to our session today. There are a few policies that support academic integrity at the university. The policy on plagiarism is extremely important. It was revised in 2016, and it includes a number of new elements that not all postgraduate supervisors are aware of. So I'm going to mention those briefly. Then in the supporting document for the policy on plagiarism is the procedure for the investigation and management of allegations of plagiarism. Now, I recommend that you consult both of these policies. They also have insights into, they provide definitions of plagiarism. They indicate how is how is the grievance procedure handled? What are the procedures? Is there a type of sliding scale, or does everybody get lumped in the same boat if they're accused of plagiarism, etc.? So they're quite extensive, and I would say pretty useful to any postgraduate student and supervisor, as well as support staff who may be working with the coordination of postgraduate students. What is mentioned in these two policies, there's a reference to the guideline on the avoidance of plagiarism document. This is a work in progress. Some departments and faculties already have a rather nice guideline. For example, the Faculty of Law. I believe it was done in collaboration with the law faculty librarian, Peter Duplessis, and they have a really nice document that gives one guidance on how to write in order to avoid plagiarism. So I encourage you to find out what's available to you in your environment. All right, so what I want to highlight in the policy on plagiarism is that apart from it giving a clear definition of what plagiarism is, we'll get to that now. It also zooms in on the responsibilities of departments, faculties, supervisors, students, examiners, etc. And it indicates that all theses and dissertations must be submitted to a Turnitin Playground module for submission for examination. This is something that some departments did in the past out of their own procedure, but it is now policy since the end of 2016. It is compulsory for all, we're talking about postgraduates now, so postgraduate theses and dissertations to go through a Turnitin Playground called a module here, but it could also be a plug-in before submitting your thesis or dissertation for examination. So it should be part of your department or your faculty's sort of checklist to ensure that you've done that beforehand. And then also, equally important, it indicates that the student and the supervisors should agree whether the Turnitin similarity report is acceptable. And there I'm going to talk a little bit later about the need for this type of closer scrutiny of a report rather than just focusing on the percentage. If we zoom in even closer at the section of the policy on plagiarism, here it says that supervisors of master's theses and doctoral dissertations are responsible for ensuring that adequate standards and procedures for the avoidance of plagiarism have been met prior to submission. But the primary responsibility is with the researcher, the writer, the student or postgraduate who is presenting the thesis or dissertation, and remains with the student or researcher whether they comply with the policy guidelines or not. Some departments have pre or supportive academic writing sessions at the beginning of each program when students start their postgraduate journey, and they often involve a seminar or a discussion on academic writing and what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. Ideally, this is the best time to start. One shouldn't wait until the end of your writing and then discover that you haven't been writing in an academically sound way. But the point being here is that actually there is an element of responsibility for departments and faculties to ensure that students have had the suitable training or support. That too is important if you get to a grievance stage and it's evident or it becomes known that the department hadn't given the student an opportunity to attend, let's say, an avoiding plagiarism session or a writing lab, academic writing workshop, then yeah, it doesn't look good. It needs to start in the beginning. We don't need to set our students up for failure. Also bearing in mind at postgraduate level, we may assume that our postgraduates have come from undergraduate where there is support and there are some scaffolding platforms in place for academic writing, but we can't assume because many of our postgraduates are from elsewhere, elsewhere in the country and elsewhere in the world, and therefore we need to make sure that everybody is on the same page. All right. The point 9.3, where it talks about theses and dissertations must be submitted to the Turnitin Playground module or other appropriate similarity detection software. If I can speak briefly on what we mean by a Turnitin Playground. We typically within our office talk about a Turnitin Sandbox, but they are one and the same, Turnitin Playground and Turnitin Sandbox. What they mean is that it's a safe space. It's the way that the Turnitin plugin is set, and the administrator sets the settings to compare the work that is submitted to Turnitin to the vast database that is within the repository of Turnitin, but not to submit the product to the repository yet, so that you can resubmit and refine your work and it doesn't pick up your earlier submission. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but note here it says it must be submitted to a playground. It doesn't say it must be submitted to the repository. I did double check with the policy developers in our division for research development, in particular Marlene Fischer. She said that they are referring to the Sandbox, the playground, the safe space where students can submit their work to find out or to check where their writing is at, and whether there are too many similarities, for example, and needs revision. Before I forget, I do want to say that there are some students or supervisors who ask, but shouldn't it go into the repository at this stage anyway? I would say no. Why? Because submitting for examination is not the final product. Once you receive your thesis or dissertation from the examiners and you've had your discussion with your supervisor or your promoter, there are often, and most oftentimes, revisions of your submitted work in which you need to polish and amend sections or buy into or see if you agree with what the examiners are recommending and make these changes. So yes, don't worry about the repository at this stage. The Turnitin Playground or Sandbox is the best safe space to work with during your research writing from the very beginning and until you submit for examination. I believe once the theses are uploaded to SunScholar, just before you graduate, they do then are submitted to the repository. So you don't need to worry that somebody else might use your work and it won't pick up. Okay, good. Also in this point, it says the student and supervisors should concur that the Turnitin or similar report is acceptable. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Turnitin. There are other ones like WriteCheck and, oh gosh, there's so many out there. There are also some for other languages. But as I said, the university has a license for Turnitin, so we use Turnitin. Note that it doesn't say that the supervisor and student should agree on the percentage. And I'll get to that just now. They say whether the report is acceptable. Okay. All right, I alluded to this a little while ago that the policy also includes how plagiarism is determined and the management of plagiarism allegations. If I could just indicate at this stage that the university does have a research integrity officer, Dr. Nicola Barsdorf. She fairly recently joined us. She was with the medical and health faculty prior to her position here with us at the Division for Research Development. I did source a younger photo of her, but she is still youthful. She comes with a lot of experience in working with research integrity. And she is one's go-to person. We often recommend that if a supervisor or anybody is concerned about having picked up plagiarism or what they think is plagiarism, that it is always best to make an appointment with the Research Integrity Officer to have an informal conversation or discussion about the nature of the plagiarism and then what should be done about it, rather than just launching straight into accusing someone of plagiarism and then you can't turn back from that. We have Professor Leslie Swartz, who is an extraordinary professor linked to the psychology department at Stellenbosch University, who is part of Nicola's office currently. So also a wealth of knowledge. All right, so we're focusing mainly on plagiarism today because very often people use Turnitin as an anti-plagiarism detector. Bear in mind, though, that academic writing integrity doesn't only entail plagiarism. It can also be scientific misconduct, inappropriate research methods that didn't have approval of the ethics committee, etc., etc. So we're zooming in on the plagiarism element today. So very often at undergraduate level, we encourage students, sometimes inadvertently, to simply know the information and demonstrate that they understand and know the information or knowledge that is gained. And the emphasis is not often, and I'm saying often because there are areas within our faculties where they do start correct academic writing right from the start. But often students aren't expected to cite correctly, or they aren't expected to start developing their own academic voice from undergraduate level. So they get to postgraduate level and they rely heavily on techniques they may have used at undergraduate level, and also with the pressure of being postgraduate, and now suddenly you're required to be even more a writer than a learner. It causes a lot of anxiety and stress. So we like to look at it with a bigger picture. If you look at academic writing, we would say that within postgraduate level, our research activities and our writing activities, one is required to rely on other scholars' work, to build on the ideas and research of others' work, but still being original. And this is the part that students and even academic staff will say is incredibly difficult to them. When I say relying on other scholars' work, especially at honours, masters, and then also at PhD level, you're not the experts yet, you're becoming the experts. So you need to draw on the experts and those that are highly regarded in your field to support your so-called novice statements or arguments. So one does need to draw on this wonderful knowledge base that we have in our literature. And we need to, especially at doctoral level, build on the ideas and add to those ideas, and still being original in your own voice. So it sounds like an incredibly tall order, and it is a process. Some people find it much easier than others, but it can be learnt if one can cognitively or constructively think about how you are writing and how you can improve. Okay. We say that plagiarism issues can be solved by using ethical principles and practices. So starting with an umbrella integrity outlook on your research and the way you write. Can people trust what you're writing? Is your work credible? Then critically engaging with the sources. Are you thinking about what you're reading, thinking about what the expert or writer is saying, considering whether what they are saying speaks to your research question, or whether it perhaps contradicts, and that sometimes is also good. One needs to look at all sides to sort of develop your own argument well. Critically engaging also would refer to your thinking about your thinking, your metacognitive thinking. And I'll talk about using a research journal or a writing journal a little later, which can help in this process. And then by explaining your ideas with regard to others, rather than just repeating what others have said, by using your own voice. And then the technical element, which is equally important to the sort of cognitive process of academic writing, the technical side of using correct citation and paraphrasing in an acceptable manner is how you can avoid issues of plagiarism. I can't instill in one the importance of playing the game. You need to work with the constructs that you're provided with. So, for example, if you're asked to use the Harvard referencing technique, then you need to become really knowledgeable at that technique, and you need to understand its ins and outs and its constructs, and you need to practice it and use it a lot. because this too reflects on your academic integrity and your academic standing as a researcher. Can you use these sort of constructs that we find in our academic realm correctly and accurately? And in so doing, citing correctly and accurately, you are also avoiding plagiarism because you're not, for example, quoting someone without using the quotation marks. Then it looks as though you've taken their work directly as your own without acknowledging it. So these elements are all very important. All right, I must just keep track of time. I need to jog through this more quickly. Just to understand quickly how researchers plagiarize, and these are quite sort of self-evident: by copying words, ideas, or arguments without acknowledgement, by acknowledging a source but not indicate that it was quoted. That's what I just referred to. Why do they plagiarize? And I think this is extremely important for academic staff and even support staff to understand that. I honestly, and maybe I'm just too much a glass half full person, believe that people don't frequently, or it is most, it's not very frequent that people plagiarize with intention. Very often it's due to poor planning, not enough time working with the content and understanding the author's argumentation or argument. But at Stellenbosch University and elsewhere in South Africa, difficulty with technical texts and using people writing in a language that isn't their first language is a huge challenge to overcome. So this is where I encourage students to really develop the language that they're writing their research in. Typically, most of our theses and dissertations at Stellenbosch University are written in English. You really need to immerse yourself in English. You need to read a lot in English, and you need to write a lot in English to the extent that you start feeling that you're dreaming in English. Because then you will be able to find your own academic voice and be able to join the conversation of what other experts are saying out there. Right, and then not use the original person's words as a crutch, because you're now able to articulate your ideas without using their exact words as a crutch. All right. I'm going to share these slides, and Cristan will have them. These are some of the resources that we recommend students access, and they frame how to approach your academic writing. Okay. Let's just quickly jump into what is Turnitin, and I understand that there probably are a number of folk who have got questions now, and I've just been, it's a lot of teacher talk. It's frustrating not being able to see you, but let me get through the sort of content that I have here, and then we can talk about any issues or questions afterwards. All right. Turnitin is a software that you can submit your work to, and you are checking for the originality of your work and the percentage of similarities that have been picked up. So it is originally an American software tool. If you turn something in America, you're submitting it, or you are handing your work in. It is not a plagiarism detector. It doesn't detect plagiarism. You'll see quite clearly in a resource that Professor from Rhodes created for us on the Enhancing Postgraduate Environments platform. I'll also share that platform with you, or the link to that website. That although Turnitin is often promoted as a plagiarism detector, it is not. You can see in the fine print it says it is clearly not. It is merely a tool that one can use, and it can be helpful in detecting areas that could be construed as plagiarism once one looks more closely at the report. but it is not an evidence that somebody has plagiarized. It is helpful because you can, once you receive your report, you can determine how much of your work is too similar to other sources out there. You can, it becomes quite evident if your paraphrasing is not effective enough. Swapping a word here and there is not construed as good paraphrasing techniques, or even swapping sentences around. One needs to paraphrase in your own words without relying too much on the original source. Turnitin does have its flaws, so therefore that's why we're impressed that it's not the only determination or tool to use if you want to check for elements of plagiarism. Turnitin cannot pick up when students have swapped words around in their sentences. They also can't pick up when students have sort of whited out quotation marks and then use the exclude quotations, exclude bibliography functions. There are numerous ways that Turnitin can be bucked, or the system can be bucked. And that's why I come back to the idea of taking your writing from one of integrity. You as a person, how would you want to be seen? If you were wanting to move into the academic world and you want to be highly regarded, you would want to have a good academic standing. Remember, your work also reflects on your department and your university, so you have a responsibility to be above board in the way that you write, and it is possible. So what I often say to students is that you might be able to trick Turnitin, and you might be able to wriggle that similarity percentage that often departments are putting too much focus on. But remember that your examiner is more likely going to be somebody that you've actually been referencing or reading their work, because they are the experts in your field. They're chosen to suit the topic. Also bear in mind your supervisor is familiar with the work out there. So there have been a number of cases where supervisors and examiners have picked up plagiarism because the work sounded too familiar. And even though Turnitin wasn't able to pick that up, the examiner and supervisor was able to identify it as somebody else's argument or somebody else's work that had just been fiddled a little bit to look like the students. So yes, Turnitin is not a policeman. It can be used as a developmental tool to enhance and refine your writing style. All right. These are more helpful writing tips that come from the Enhancing Postgraduate Environments website. And there's the Keeping a Reading Journal, Keeping a Research Journal, and Just to Write. Selena Delport may have indicated in her previous session for this research week that very often when one is stuck with one's writing, the best thing to do is to put down your computer or any technical device and to just write freehand. It also has been shown to improve or to lessen elements of plagiarism in students' work, because some research has shown that when writing your work out by hand, you are more critically engaging with the content. And there's also the element of the left-right brain that, by physically moving your hand, you're engaging more critical entities of your brain. So, it can be used to overcome writer's block, and it can also be used to develop arguments in your own voice, rather than just cutting and pasting and developing your arguments within a computer, for example. All right. Getting the technical elements right, I have spoken about this. You need to find out what your referencing technique is that your department or your supervisor expects you to use. And please note that the library has wonderful training in using the Mendeley referencing management tool. So please have a look at their calendar to see how one can use that. So it's beneficial because it's not only helping with your citations, it can also be used as a type of filing system and organizing your work and the articles as you find them on the databases and develop your argument. Also very important to note, and I know I digress a little bit here, but students often don't know about these, and even as supervisors or lecturers, that the Language Centre offers free writing consultations, and they've upped their game now that we are in lockdown, and put a lot of their consultations online and also some of their workshops online. They also have a writing style resource. So these things are available. We just need you to know that you need to look for it and be self-directed learners. Good. I think at this stage, I'm going to ask my colleague Cristan to take over, because the tips when using Turnitin, I think you need to see exactly how Turnitin works for what I'm going to say to make sense. Okay, thank you, Cristan.
Okay, great. So I'm going to do a demonstration using Turnitin on our Sandbox. I'm going to show you both ways because I know, as Alison mentioned, we are a mixed audience. So I know there are some lecturers, researchers, as well as students. And I think it's beneficial that both sides get to see how the Sandbox works. So let me just share my screen with you. Okay, great. Alison, can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. So this is our postgraduate skills development Turnitin Sandbox. As Alison mentioned, it's important to check in with your department as they might have a preferred Sandbox or playground that they would like you to use. And also just take note, as Alison did mention, the difference between a Sandbox and then submitting into the repository. So with the Sandbox, obviously you can make multiple submissions, as many submissions as you like, and it doesn't go into the repository. So on our Sandbox page, we've included the link to the SU policy document, and we've also included other helpful manuals and training tips that you can access. So I do recommend taking the time to go through this. So to make a submission through the Sandbox itself, you will basically scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you'll just click on this link, the PG Skills Turnitin Sandbox. So I have already opened up a tab to show you what your marker is going to see. Obviously, if you're submitting your thesis or dissertation, you're not going to receive your feedback through Turnitin. But I do know some lecturers and courses do prefer when you submit smaller assignments and essays, if you're doing a mini thesis and then overall coursework, that they do like to use the Turnitin function to provide feedback as well as your mark. Okay, so within the system itself, as a marker, you'll have like multiple submissions. I've just narrowed it down to my example because then you could see all the submissions that have been put into our Sandbox. You'll first see the name of the student, the submission title. So I've just titled mine example. It will have the Turnitin paper ID, when it was submitted, as well as the similarity percentage. Now it's the same if you're a student or a marker. If the box is grey and says pending, it means that the report hasn't generated yet. So you do have to give it some time to do so. Also, as a facilitator or marker, you will have access to be able to delete the actual submission. You will also have the function to basically submit a paper on the student's behalf. Sometimes I know with load shedding and those kind of things, assignment is due, and you've emailed your lecturer and you've said, I'm really battling to access Turnitin. Can you submit my paper on my behalf? And that is something your lecturer or facilitator can do. But obviously, first port of call is that you should be submitting your own assignments. Okay, so I'm just going to click on the submission title to access the feedback studio. It does take 1 or 2 seconds to load. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, my name's at the top. I've just submitted an example document, so it's not very long, it's just 2 pages. I'm going to zoom out for a bit. I'm just going to also systematically go through the side panels so you kind of know where everything is. So the first section is basically the instructor feedback layers. Now, in these layers, you have the first section is how your marker or your facilitator can provide feedback on your essay and assignment. If you yourself are a marker, there is many ways you can do this. The first little section is basically quick marks. Now, this is actually a great way if you like to mark more in-depthly and you want to provide feedback per section. The first thing I recommend you do is maybe just popping on the actual percentage of similarity that's been generated, so you have more of an idea of where the system has picked up issues. Then you can go back here and to basically just very quickly provide a quick remark. There is a drop-down list where you can choose from various things from academic integrity to composition to format to source credibility, etc. And it's as simple as you can just click and drag the mark onto the feedback itself. And if you click on the mark, you are able to elaborate on why you've added this comment here. So you want to add, for example, this section, it can very clearly shows that the student hasn't cited. So you want the student to add a citation to the quotation itself. Also, the citation, the quotation does need quotation marks. So you can comment here, add quotation marks. If you can move this around, but if you've added it by accident, you can just click the delete button. It's as simple as that. Okay, so the next section is receiving or providing feedback through the text comment / voice comment. So you can either do a 3-minute voice comment. It allows you to go up to 3 minutes, or you can provide a text comment. Obviously, if you are a marker yourself, you just need to be cognizant of the fact of not every student should receive a voice comment or a text comment, as students might have hearing or vision impairments. So you just need to keep that in mind. Sometimes multiple people are marking a particular assignment, so you can upload a rubric, and this rubric can be customized. So if you just click on the drop-down area, you can create your own rubric as well as upload a rubric. So this section is also very important. So if we click on the 39, which is the similarity percentage that Turnitin has generated, you will see within the feedback itself, it has shown you where it has picked up these similarities. And then it gives the top source of where this information could have come from, the similarity itself. So another important thing is to know the filter icon. It kind of just looks like a funnel. Often your students' bibliography or reference list gets picked up at the bottom. And this can often increase the percentage of similarity. So it is important to just exclude the bibliography. And you also, with some faculties and areas of research, you do a lot of block quoting. I know this is very much the case with things like law and theology. So if you find this work with a lot of block quotes, then it does help to exclude the quotes, and then this will also lower the total percentage. But obviously, as Alison mentioned, it's not about how high the percentage is, it's about the types of similarities that have been picked up. Also, just make sure to apply the changes once you've clicked on the icons. If you, as a marker, need to download the report to store on file or send to the examiners, you will be able to download from here, and it does give you various options of how you can download it. A digital receipt will just give a short indication of the time it was submitted, the title, and that it has been run through Turnitin. And then last but not least, you can also provide a mark. So you can give it a mark in the top section. And if you're marking a lot of papers all in one go, you can use these little 2 toggle buttons to kind of scroll through each assignment to mark. Okay, great. So that's what your marker or examiner would be doing. So I'm just going to change my role to student. And then I'll show you how you as a student, what you're going to see when you access Turnitin. Sorry, it does take 1 or 2 moments to load. Just bear with me. Okay, let's just refresh this. Sometimes you can use the refresh button. It does help just to refresh your submission. Also with online learning, you just have to be a little bit more patient with Sunlearn, because especially when there's a lot of students using it, it does put more load on the server itself. Okay, great. So you as a student, this is what you're going to see. You can access it the same way. So just scroll down to the bottom of our page if you want to use our Sandbox. I know the library also has a Sandbox, so you are welcome to email them and also ask for access. It's whatever your preference is, but I just recommend that once you've chosen a Sandbox, that you stick to that Sandbox. Because if you start submitting in various other Sandboxes, they do tend to pick each other up. So just be careful of that. So when you as a student are submitting your work, you have to take note of the following. First of all, the Turnitin plugin works best if you're using your Google Chrome browser. So just make sure you have Google Chrome downloaded onto your computer or laptop / device, whatever you're using. It's also important to note that you stick within the 20 megabytes or 500 pages upload. If you feel you can't stick within that in terms of your uploading of your document, which you can upload in Word, Excel, or PDF format, then we recommend you break it into chunks and upload it that way. If you're a visual arts student and you've added lots of images and those kind of things that you're referencing throughout your work, you might find that your document is going to extend above the 20 megabyte size file. So the Turnitin team often recommend just removing the images and then re-uploading your document that way. Okay, so you can view your digital receipt from here. This is what it's going to look like, and you can print it, but I will show you how you can get a digital version because I know we're not printing much nowadays. So this is what it's going to look like. So to submit your paper, it's very simple. You're just going to click on the upload cloud. Here you can basically just take your document from your desktop and just drag it to upload it. I'm not going to do that now. And then you must just add a title for your submission. You can also click on this little file icon here and then choose file, and then you can search for it within your computer itself. So to upload your document, it's as simple as that. When you first upload the first time, it can take between 5 to 10 minutes. But after that, when you make your second, third, or fourth submission, it can take up to 24 hours for it to generate your report. So just I recommend not doing it when you have a bit of a time crunch. Rather submit it earlier than later. And as Alison said, your intention is to use Turnitin as a developmental tool, which means that you're constantly uploading your work, working through the similarities that it's picked up, re-paraphrasing, making sure you've got all your references, etc. And if you don't need to download your report or document once it's ready, you can also click on this button here, the download submission button. Okay, so we're just going to click through. It's just going to load for a bit. Okay, so as you can see, it's a little bit different to what your marker will see. It will have your name at the top and your submission title. As you can see, I've used the same example here. If your marker has provided feedback this way, you will see either your comment or text recording here that has appeared if it has been marked. You will also receive, if they've chosen to use the quick marks, you will see the little icons in here, and then you can click on each icon if they've provided further feedback on those. So as you can see in your match overview, it has provided you with a percentage. If you go to the All Sources icon, it gives a list of where one particular source could have come from other areas. So it will give, here you can see it's come from a main source, but here it will give a further breakdown of where else that particular source could have potentially come from. And it will provide a match as to how similar it is in this section. So as your marker can also filter to exclude the bibliography, so can you. So you'll just click on this little filter icon. It's clicked on at the moment, but you can say exclude quotes, exclude bibliography. If you find, yet again, for example, you've submitted something with a lot of direct quotes, you can click on this section here to basically exclude, if it's more than 4 words in a quote, then you can exclude that. And then just make sure to apply the changes once you have done so. To download the report, it's a similar function, so you can click here. You can download the current view, the digital receipt, which is just, as I mentioned earlier, proof to say that you have handed it in, as well as the originally submitted file. When you download your current view, it will basically have all the similarities that have been picked up. The originally submitted file will just be the file itself. It won't have all the similarities that shown on the document. So I just wanted to highlight 1 or 2 things. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I just wanted to show you something quickly just to highlight on what Alison was saying. So for example, if you've given a copy-paste direct quote, and you haven't put in quotation marks and you haven't referenced it, Turnitin is going to pick it up. And as you can see, it's all highlighted in red. So to rectify this, you need to either put in your direct quotes and you need to reference it, or you need to re-look at paraphrasing the paragraph into your own words. Just another note, it's not correct paraphrasing if you're paraphrasing every 3rd or 4th word into your own words. Even if you have referenced it, technically that is still plagiarism because you haven't sufficiently put it into your own words, and Turnitin will pick that up. Doesn't always pick it up, but it should. So with the second sentence, you can see, even though it's been referenced, it hasn't been paraphrased properly. So you do need to think about how you paraphrase and really thinking about how can I say this in my own words. From time to time, Turnitin does pick up a citation. Now, obviously, this is where it comes back to the, a system isn't always perfect. Even though this has been cited correctly, that's why it's important not to look at the percentage, because obviously this increases your percentage, but rather look at the types of similarities that have been picked up. So just the last thing I wanted to show you is that you can also view this in a text-only report. You just click on the text-only here. Some people do prefer to look at their similarity report within the text-only section, but it's whatever you feel comfortable with. It's just a more basic, simple way of viewing things, and it does have similar features where you can include the quotes, include bibliography. Obviously, we've already said exclude, so you can re-add these into the report if you would like to. Okay, so that's it from my side. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Alison, if you would like to take over, you're welcome to. It's muted.
Thank you, Chris. Get back to slideshow. Bear with me a minute. So many things that this not so young mind has to take into consideration with technology. Okay. All right. I realized as I was talking that, yeah, because the session is just an hour and a half long, or strictly speaking, an hour and 15 minutes, that we allow you 15 minutes questions at the end, that our sessions are typically 2.5 to 3 hours long. So, yeah, and I just launched into it without even clarifying what would be construed as plagiarism. If you look at the university's policy on plagiarism that I referred to earlier, plagiarism is defined as the use of ideas or material of others without acknowledgement, or the reuse of one's own previously evaluated or published material without acknowledgement. And then self-plagiarism is there in brackets. Self-plagiarism is also an aspect of the 2016 policy on plagiarism that is new, that wasn't in the previous policy, the concept of self-plagiarism. So using the ideas of others without acknowledging that they are somebody else's ideas. So being dishonest about the argument that you're putting forward, not accrediting the original owner of the idea, words, or argumentation. So Cristan and I have been talking about Turnitin and how you can use it as a developmental tool, but you can only really use it if you understand what good scientific writing entails. And I alluded to some of the elements earlier on, but just to reiterate, good scientific writing is accurate and trustworthy. There's that idea of showing integrity and using the citation techniques accurately, using the best sources, so using articles that come from accredited journals, articles that have been drawn from the experts and the those that are highly regarded in your field, credible articles and sources versus, for example, Wikipedia or something that doesn't have, is more sort of popular rather than academic. But saying that, there is room for some popular sources being drawn in, depending on the type of research you're doing. So you're going to be using the best sources, carefully selecting those that are relevant to your research question, and then showing off your sources. And how do we do that? Obviously by citing, by acknowledging where the sources came from. And in the video that I referred you to, and I'm going to refer to again soon, about the misuses of Turnitin, Professor Sue McKenna very clearly illustrates why we cite and the various reasons and various purposes for citing. And one of them is to show your reader that you have sort of really immersed yourself in the field. You understand the arguments, you've consulted the important written pieces, and yeah, you're actually doing scholarly writing. And carefully selecting the relevant sections. This too can be tricky for novice writers, not knowing which part is most relevant to your argument and just wanted to lump it all in because it all looks good or all looks important. Remember, use your research question or hypothesis as your guiding reference. I was advised at one stage by a supervisor to keep my research question pinned up in front, wherever I was working on my research. So let's say, for example, on a wall where my desk was, so that you can not be distracted by all the other interesting information within articles, let alone within the scholarly database out there. So staying focused and using your own logic to put it together entails, and here's the metacognitive thinking that comes in, comparing, contrasting, evaluating, and considering what you're reading. Adding your own questions and views, and this is also where your writing or reading journal would come in hand. Jotting down your thoughts, questions, and remember to always, if you do like an area of somebody's work and it's a direct quotation, when you're making your notes, just indicate clearly to yourself, either put it in quotation marks or have it in different color font with a very clear reference, so that you don't forget that it's not your own work a year or so down the line when you relook at your notes. All right, engaging and showing critical thinking. So this is the part that I mentioned at the beginning, where at undergraduate level, one isn't always encouraged to do this as much, especially in your first year, for example. You are not necessarily required to give your opinion or to even deviate from what you're learning. So, yeah, I'm giving you this as a broader framework. There are various sources that one can access on good academic writing. Your faculty librarian would also be able to guide you in your specific discipline, what type of writing would be most appropriate, etc. You can also use your the Sun Scholar database and look at theses and dissertations that were written within your faculty, or even students that your other students that your supervisors supervise, to see their style of writing, the constructs that are expected. Cristan did indicate that in law and also in cases in theology, one is expected to use a lot of block quotes because you're drawing on cases or text from the Bible, for example. So your work will, that type of academic writing or format will look quite different to perhaps something in the sciences or even in the arts. So one needs to familiarize with what's expected of you, but don't be put off if you. Some students often think that they need to write in a very highfalutin way and they need to sound like they're extremely posh and knowledgeable, and that's actually an accurate perception. Your research needs to be accessible, and yes, you are writing in a formal way, but you don't need to write in such a complicated way that your reader doesn't actually understand what you're trying to say. So develop your own style. Have a look at, as I said, other scholars or students in your environment to see their type of writing style, and then create and develop your own writing voice. Also, always really important, I mentioned the idea of joining the conversation. Bear in mind that this isn't just a one-way thing, that you are finding information from articles, plonking it together in a sort of a patchwork of information, and then saying that this is now a good job. You need to be able to rework it according to your own research question. You need to be able to rework it to make it relevant to your context. And as I said, your own style of writing. So it's going to be a process if you're not good at it, and or if you feel you're not good at it. And developing that writing voice, to my mind, is crucial for you to be a good researcher, so that you can feel that you're not an imposter. That imposter syndrome is a huge problem with mental blocks of why we're not getting on with our research, because we're too scared to write, or we're too scared to put down what we think. So yeah, but I digress. Let us move on. Paraphrasing is a very important skill that one needs to include when doing academic writing, and Cristan spoke about this and indicated some elements that are not acceptable. But when you paraphrase somebody else's argument, or you want to draw in their piece of work, it involves putting a passage from source material into your own words. A paraphrase must also be attributed to the original source. So in other words, you must say where your source came from, you must do in-text referencing. And note that it is also necessary for paraphrasing. Sometimes researchers or students think that they can just paraphrase and that's okay. It's important to indicate the source. If you haven't paraphrased well enough and it really just looks like the original piece, then you find that you can't, you feel you can't reword it, then perhaps you need to use one or two quotes very sparingly in your research piece to really carry home an important argument or point, to use it as this golden nugget quote. But a academic writing shouldn't be riddled with a whole lot of quotes. You might be referencing correctly, but it's not good academic writing style. It doesn't read easily, and when students have done that, it's quite evident when one reads the work. It reads very in a disjointed fashion, and one almost does hear these different voices of the different writers coming through. So there needs to be that flow within your writing. All right, some of you might be saying, okay, but how do I paraphrase? Or how can I improve on my paraphrasing? Here are just some quick steps you could consider. You need to read the text, and you probably need to read it a number of times. And for those who are writing in a language that isn't their first language, let's say it's English, bear in mind that even to a first language English speaker, some of these academic articles are challenging. So give yourself a break, don't be too hard on yourself, immerse yourself in it, reread it, look at it from a different angle, put it down, discuss it, select the relevant points, highlight the areas that are the most important parts of the argument, and then try to rewrite it or even retell it to somebody in your own words and style. And what you will find is that you have a different sentence structure, which often helps to change the voice or to make it more authentic in your own voice, and always important to cite. So it has a lot to do with, you almost need to put away the source and see how you can write it in your own words, how you understand it. The paraphrasing techniques, of course, you can read and reread, look up words you don't know, read until you understand the author's meaning, and if you still don't understand it, perhaps you need to look for another source that has more accessible language or way of explaining it. Put the source away and then explain it. Some people are more visual learners, some people are more auditory, etc., bodily kinesthetics, so you need to work out what works best for you. All right, and then here's the metacognitive thinking. Now, this is the Turnitin resource that I encourage everybody to access at some stage during this week. This is as I said, from the Enhancing Postgraduate Environments website. And that's an open access platform that we were also involved in from Stellenbosch University, developing online resources for postgraduate students specifically, but there is also information there for supervisors. And one of the project leaders was the South African project leader was Professor Sue McKenna from Rhodes University, who is highly regarded in the academic world, especially when she works with academic writing and support of. So she put together this video, or it's slides spoken over, about the misuses of Turnitin and other text matching software. And I would say if this is the only resource that you look at after the session, then you would have something to take away with you, because as I said, she really captures the essence of academic writing, what we should be doing, why we're doing it this way, and how we can use Turnitin effectively, and why we shouldn't focus on that similarity, which is just a way of policing students rather than encouraging them to use Turnitin as a helpful tool. All right. She also wrote an article in The Conversation on policing plagiarism could make universities miss the real problems. All right. Sometimes we put things in place that in order to regulate and control, but we then lose the original point. So yeah, if you'd like to access this article, you'll be able to get that online. All right.
Alison, sorry to interrupt. I can't hear you at the moment.
I think you might have muted yourself.
I see, I did. I'm so talented.
Yeah, you can hear me now.
At what stage? Was it just now or the whole time?
It was just now. So
okay.
As soon as you went onto the slide, we couldn't hear what you were saying.
All right. No worries. I'm going to... Let me just see why it's now stopped. Oh, there you go. I'm going to finish off now. A lot of this was covered in Cristan's section, and also I alluded to it earlier. Cristan did emphasize that you must ensure that you're using the correct Turnitin sandbox and that it is actually a sandbox. Some departments have their own Turnitin plugins at Stellenbosch University, so find out if your department has one that they want you to use. And yeah, bear in mind that, Chris, did you say that the report is often really large and is not often able to be emailed to a supervisor or emailed to the examination office? One would then, if they did require the full report, which is really ideal as evidence before you submit your thesis for examination, then one could share it via something like Google Drive, a shared folder, or WeTransfer, or any of those free tools to be able to share that with students or supervisors, depending on which way around you're working. We've also put together a piece on how to interpret your Turnitin report. It's just a one-pager explaining why one shouldn't look at the percentage only and look more at the content, the nature of the similarities. Chris also indicated that sometimes the Turnitin plugin or the system will pick up references even though you've excluded. I notice especially footnotes are often still included, even though nothing much you can really do about that, only to accept that it is proper referencing and just check that you've done it correctly. only the administrator of the Turnitin plugin is able to exclude sources. So typically, you know, for example, if you've written a chapter for or an article from your chapter, your literature review, and it's already published before you submit your final product, your Turnitin report is more than likely going to pick up that article that you've included in your chapter. Depending on the type of dissertation or thesis you're doing, you'd either be self-referencing yourself, self-citing, which is a feather in your cap if you're able to do that. Sometimes students say, but surely if it's your own work, you don't need to cite yourself. But if it is work that was previously assessed, or if it was used in a different context, then one does need to acknowledge that this was previously used, but it is to your benefit. You will notice that the top researchers and academics cite themselves in their articles, and it's quite a sort of a big shot thing to be able to do. So, but if you have a high similarity of in let's say your literature review, because you've already published an article, you know, you can, if you've used our postgraduate skills Turnitin Sandbox, I can, if you contact me, exclude a particular source once I've investigated that it is indeed your work. But what most faculties do and departments do is they write a cover letter just before they submit the work for the thesis or dissertation for examination. In the cover letter, it's indicated that the similarity percentage is reflecting higher than usual due to the fact that this such and such article was published by the student such and such. So you explain and you know, put it out there even before the examiner starts reading your script. Good. Right. Any technical issues? Here's the contact details Cristan referred to, the SunLearn team. So if you have submitted a report to Turnitin and it's still not in, you know, a week later, just know that most of the time it's because the work that you uploaded was either too large or wasn't recognized by the Turnitin system. So if it just keeps on circling, then you need to look closely at the nature of what you uploaded. But if you have other things, occasionally Turnitin does have technical problems. Sometimes they're offline or they're fixing a bug or a glitch or whatever. You would be able to contact the SunLearn team to inquire whether there is currently a problem with Turnitin or not. Good. Rounding off here, this is where you can find us, and there are our contact details. Of course, we're mostly virtual at the moment, but we're hoping that'll change within the next month or so. And if I can do a little bit of promotion here, students sometimes get to the end of their research journey, let's say it's their third year masters or whatever, and they've only just discovered that our office exists, or that our skills program is there for them, and that we offer our workshops and training free of charge. So please take note that there is this platform, and that we do work with the other support services and divisions at Stellenbosch University. We work collaboratively. If you have any question, even if you doubt whether the question is relevant to us, if it's research or postgraduate related, you're welcome to pop us a line to inquire where the best information or the best source to find what you need is. Good. Kirchner, should we open the floor for questions then?
Yes, we can. We can start with some questions that's already been asked. Dr. Manyati asked, he wants to check up what is the difference between the standard Sandbox and the other 3 layer links. And he also posted an image to explain what he is referring to.
Okay, is it in the chat?
Yes.
I think, okay, I haven't looked, must I look in the chat, or will you?
Yeah, I think you can have a look
Scroll
at it.
up. Okay.
Yes. So I
So
think it is the one
oh,
which
wait.
basically says
Right.
no bibliography and excludes bibliography, one with
Yeah.
no
This
limits
is
and so on.
the Kuchner. You could perhaps answer this one. This is the library website. But I could just say that those are plugins that have been set differently. So they give you options. So if you want to upload to the Turnitin link, that will give you a report that has no filters. In other words, it includes all the text and isn't excluding bibliography, etc. Then they give you the option of using that one, or Turnitin link 2, the one that excludes bibliography, or Turnitin link 3. So I don't know, Krishna, do you know which Turnitin link 3 is? Is that set to go into the repository for perhaps?
Not as far as I know. This is purely ours is still purely a sandbox mode, so it might just be an alternative link if somebody has a third document that they would like to upload, while the other one is occupied.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because in the postgraduate skills, in our Turnitin plugin, we have, especially in our previous years, we've had a number like Sandbox 1, Sandbox 2, etc. But it's actually, in our case, it's the same. It's the same one. It doesn't matter. It's the same plugin. It doesn't matter which one you. Our current 2021 only has one to submit to, so it's hopefully less confusing. But Cristan did say that if you start with one Turnitin Sandbox or plugin, you should continue with it, with that particular piece of work you're working with. So if the student is already using the library's Sunlearn, this one that's on our screen, or that was being the question about, then you would continue with that with your thesis or dissertation. There are no pros and cons. They're equal. It's just a different place to upload. But if you've already started on the postgraduate skills platform, then you would continue with ours. That's why we say check with your department whether they have one they want you to use, because rather start from the beginning uploading your drafts to that one. When you get to the final submission before your examination, they may require you to submit to their sandbox. And then what might happen if you've used our one and then you switch over to theirs, last minute, the Turnitin plugins at Stellenbosch University can sometimes pick one another up, and then it pushes up your similarity. It picks up your own work, even though it wasn't set to go to the repository. Okay, so that was, I hope that answered the question there.
Yeah, the next one, and yes, is there a minimum specific similarity percentage that is recommended for students when doing their research projects?
Okay, this is what we are strongly advising departments and faculties to move away from. I believe there are still a number of environments at Stellenbosch University who stipulate that students must have a minimum of, let's say, 10% similarity when they submit their assignment and their report. But this is how Turnitin sort of got a bad name. So at undergraduate level, you've got really, really big classes. You've got students that you can't necessarily engage with and get, build rapport, and they sort of feel that they're just a number, and so therefore that's not therefore, but that's one of the reasons why students might feel that if they haven't planned correctly and they're now late for a submission, that they might be tempted to use somebody else's assignment from a previous year or whatever. I mean, students are creative beasts, but we hope that they learn that integrity is good. But what then happens is departments ask their students, it's compulsory, of course, because now it is, but then the students submit their work through Turnitin, and then all the departments or the lecturer asks is that one pager that the Turnitin report indicates the percentage of similarity, but it doesn't actually show what type of similarities. So you can fool Turnitin and wriggle it down to a smaller percentage, but still have plagiarized. And that is why we don't encourage setting a limit. Law faculty, I understand, for their postgraduates, they also have guidelines there. So, I mean, you know, typically there might be a 35% similarity, but then when you look at in a law thesis, but if you look more closely, you see that it's the nature of the way that they must portray their research. So no, there isn't a set amount. Obviously, if it's incredibly high and you've got red patches and similarities all over your report, then clearly there's something going on there, and you need to check it. So one sort of thinks that a lower similarity is better. Yeah, but you need to look at you can have a 0% similarity and still have plagiarized. You've just cleverly sort of fiddled the text so that Turnitin can't pick it up. Okay, so that's that question. Does that answer your question?
Not sure if Mr. Guitar is going to reply.
Okay, no worries. But should we go on to the next question?
Yeah, so next question is, how many consecutive words are considered as plagiarism?
Okay, and I know, and I'm laughing because I've been there. I'm not laughing at you because some people do use that function, and they maybe exclude 3 consecutive words or so. But I would be guided by your supervisor or promoter. Because there are, I mean, we talk about paraphrasing, but we're not expecting you to use completely different words for every single part of the sentence in your own argument. You know, there will be elements that are similar, but then they are most often typical words that we use or vocabulary we use in research, or phrase banks that would be linking and talking about methodology, etc. So it's more about those really condensed patches of sort of solid blocks that one needs to be concerned about. But Cristan, I need to share with the audience that you too are a co-presenter of our workshops, and you have wonderful insight into the editing and use of language. So would you also like to add your 2 cents worth?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, because you can't really even paraphrasing an entire paragraph can technically be considered as plagiarism if you do not fully acknowledge that whole paragraph is coming from an original another source. And I think this is something to reiterate again, that Turnitin is not a plagiarism detector. It's simply a similarity index. So there's a lot of ways to cheat the system. But the most important thing and the most fundamental thing is just cite whenever you use a source. That's the easiest way to avoid it. I always tell people that the moment they worry that they're committing plagiarism, they're most likely not committing plagiarism, because plagiarism is not an accidental thing. There is accidental types, but that's usually just from lack of experience in academic writing. But plagiarism is a deliberate act aimed at deceiving your readers. So as long as you cite, as long as you give credit from where you got your information and you don't pretend that it is your own, then you can be fairly safe. Then you should be quite safe. But you can always, if you are uncertain, you are welcome to even send me the piece if you're worried that it might be too seem like plagiarism to you, and I will review it and I'll give you my opinion on that as well.
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, it does help, and it helps to have a second eye on things. So even if one doesn't contact Cristan or even your supervisor, draw on, create a sort of a support, sort of collegial relationship with your co-students. Others studying similar work. or within your department. Because often just verbalizing and grappling with that becomes evident if something is too similar or not. Good. Any more questions?
Okay, there's two questions that I think are both tied to the same issue, and that is now with the new article format of PhDs. That the articles have already been submitted via a plagiarism detector. So Turnitin, once you submit your PhD, is going to pick up those similarities, and how the one Ms. Fulyoon asked, should she just include a cover letter to explain that the similarity index is going to be high due to the articles?
Yeah, that is what is typically done by most departments and faculties. I do occasionally get a request from a student for me to exclude it as administrator of our plugin, and as I have done that, and it can work, but I think it's not necessary. I think that just that cover letter should suffice. And there again, in your cover letter, you're telling the examiner that you are already published, and and that's one of the graduate attributes, to be able to show that you can communicate your research. So it's something to blow your trumpet about, and you can do that in the cover letter in a sort of a subtle way.
All right, so the next one, how to catch students who cheat by adding, as you said, either whitening out the quotation marks or adding an extra letter to a word and making it a small letter or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole string of ways that students have managed to buck the system. So. And it really upsets departments when they discover that students have done this. They're so disappointed, and they just, but if one watches Sue McKenna's Misuses of Turnitin, and she explains that very often by putting this mechanism in place and using Turnitin as a policeman, we in a sense are encouraging or sort of putting students on the spot, that they start looking for ways to mess with Turnitin. So what some departments do is they request that the electronic version or the report gets submitted electronically. So there you would probably need to share it via Google Drive or WeTransfer, because it's quite big. And then if it's in Word, one can then take the whole document and make it all, let's say, black font, and then it'll pick up areas that might have been whited out. You just got to, as students are creative, supervisors and departments need to be creative too, to reverse their system and find out, what a student's doing. But it really is more often than not that the examiner or the study leader is the one who picks up the plagiarism, because it just sounds too similar to something else that they know is from another expert. Especially at postgraduate level. It might be easier to do that at undergraduate, because markers are marking so many papers, and it all just becomes one in the end. But at postgraduate, your work is looked at much more closely, especially at master's and doctoral level. Yeah. So.
Okay. The next question I answered in typing, but there's also a comment from my colleague, Mr. Saviwa Bangani, that there is also the fear of students who have they've submitted their theses and they've gone through Turnitin, and now they want to publish articles out of it. And there are certain journals or publishers that tend to, the moment they get a high similarity report, even if it's based on a thesis, that they summarily reject the article.
students are advised by their supervisors or departments to ask the Sun Scholar team to, the embargo, to hold back on putting the thesis on Sun Scholar for, let's say, what's the next 6 months or so. Are you familiar with that, Kirchner?
Yes, as far as I know, I'll maybe have to just clarify, maybe with one of my colleagues who's on the session, but I think you can put an embargo on your thesis to go onto the institutional repository up to 2 years.
Yeah, so it gives you time to write that article if you're worried about that. Yeah, so if you've, and it also depends on the timeline that it takes the Sun Scholar team to get everything onto the Sun Scholar database. But if you've submitted your work to the Sandbox and shortly after you've graduated, you submit something to the a journal, it might not be in a repository yet, so it might be okay. But then I wonder, whether it wouldn't be worthwhile then finding out if the administrator could exclude the resource. It's just a bit short-sighted of the journals to be so rash, but yeah.
Just to add on that, I also imagine that you also can't extract whole paragraphs and copy paste it into your article.
No.
Just keep in mind the person does need to reference them cite themselves and also re-paraphrase it, because you can't resubmit work that's already been graded and marked and exact copy to a journal. It does need to be completely overhauled and re-written.
Yeah, you're not just repeating what you did in your thesis, because that's already a completed product. You are drawing elements of your thesis or dissertation and creating either extended argument or another argument about that topic. You can, supervisors and departments, they talk about it, what's it called? Salami slicing, but anyway, you can get, if you are clever and you have enough meat in your thesis or dissertation, you can actually get 2 or 3 or more articles out of one thesis or dissertation by focusing on specific elements of them and then developing your article from there.
Kirchner, if you can allow me to kind of respond to my question.
Yes.
Yes. Normally, those fears are unfounded. Contrary to what my colleagues have just indicated, you find that most journals, as long as you still write the cover letter that you talked about, when you have published you have published in a journal and you are submitting thesis, you just write a cover letter. It's the same even with most journals, they would still accept. But there would be some journals that would say it shouldn't be more than 75% in terms of the similarity to the thesis, which is quite high. So it's normally really not founded fears, but there are those fears that you would normally find from postgraduate students as well as the supervisors. But most journals they do understand. They would even accept, something that is 90%, 95%, in terms of similarity to the thesis, because the thesis technically is not published. It's not a published document. So they still accept. Yeah, as long as you are upfront about it, you indicate that this has been this was extracted from a thesis, and the thesis is already online. You can even indicate the repository that is
where they can track it.
Yes. So they will normally understand.
Yeah. Also in disciplines like the sciences, where you are relaying findings of lab work, there are only so many ways that you can carry that over. So one needs to work with the nature of the research as well. Have we come to the end, Kirchner, or?
Yes, I think there's no further questions. There's just another comment from my colleague Paulette, who works with the Science
Yes,
College.
Paulette.
Yeah, so she says, if you do plan to publish, please ask beforehand for Science College to place an embargo on your thesis dissertation.
Perfect.
So they can do that. And yeah, just a final comment from me as well. I did post a link here to our upcoming Smart Researcher webinars. So they're not part of Research Week. They're additional workshops that the library provides. And yeah, we're just inviting everybody to have a look at them if you want to attend any of them as well. They're all online, so you can access them from anywhere.
Okay, that's fantastic. And if I can have a last little word in there, our postgraduate office also has an online version of our face-to-face avoiding plagiarism workshop. One can self-enroll for it on Sunlearn, and I can include that in the slides that I share with you, Kirchner. So if you want to listen to our usual offering from beginning till end, sort of an asynchronous style, at your own time, you can do that. It turns more into examples of good and bad paraphrasing, and a little bit more about the academic writing versus our focus today, which was on using Turnitin.
All right, I think then we can conclude. A huge thanks to you, Alison and Cristan, for hosting this session. It's always valuable to learn. Every time there is something that I tend to forget, even with Turnitin, even though I'm supposed to know a lot about it.
You do, not to worry. No, you're most welcome. And please, those who are listening, whether you're supervisor or student or support staff, please press on our button if you're ever unsure or curious or need to know something. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for attending. I'll keep the meeting open for another minute or so, and then I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.